Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Chrisley says Kerdiles is part of their family after death. Chrisley is the latest member of the Chrisley family to pay tribute to the tragic death of Kerdiles. The sad news broke Saturday morning that had been involved in a motorcycle accident that ultimately claimed his life. Chrisley, along with Grayson and Savannah, have all shared heartfelt feelings about and his untimely passing. Find out what Kyle had to say about and what he meant to him and the Chrisley family. Chrisley says Kerdiles is part of their family. Kerdiles' death has shaken fans and also the Chrisley family. Kyle is the latest member of the family to speak up and share their thoughts about passing. He went to Instagram and shared a photo that included himself, and Todd Chrisley. He captioned the post, "He's not the only member of the family to speak out and share how much was loved." Chrisley also shared multiple photos of himself with and noted how much he loves him and how much he will be missed. Everyone continues to be in disbelief that is really gone. The accident that took his life occurred around 3:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. He was riding his motorcycle in a residential area just north of Nashville. Reportedly ran a stop sign and collided with the driver's side of a BMW SUV. That driver was not injured badly. However, was transported to Vanderbilt Medical Center where he succumbed to his injuries. Kerdiles and Savannah Chrisley broke off their engagement in 2020. However, the two were on and off again for quite some time. Following his death, she spoke out and shared a photo of them walking along the beach holding hands and smiling. She said that heaven gained an angel today. Plus, she asked for to give her a sign that he was okay. Savannah then noted that she loves him and can't wait to ride bikes on the beaches of heaven someday. Everyone who knew was touched by his sweet soul. Another life that was taken way too soon. Was able to enjoy time with his beloved family at the beginning of September. At the time, he noted that he would not take those moments for granted again. The late afternoon sun spilled across the rolling Tennessee hills, casting a golden light over the Chrisley family home. It was one of those warm, bittersweet days when life felt both painfully fragile and beautifully infinite. The hum of cicadas filled the air, and somewhere in the distance, a wind chime swayed gently, its melody soft but persistent, like a whisper from someone long gone. Chrisley sat on the back porch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, holding a coffee mug that had long gone cold. His eyes were distant, the weight of the past few months still heavy on him. When Kerdiles passed, the shock rippled through the entire Chrisley family like a storm tearing through a quiet town. But for Kyle, the loss cut in a way he hadn't expected. He wasn't just Savannah's ex. Kyle finally said aloud, as if speaking to the breeze, "He was one of us." For years, Kyle had battled his own demons: addiction, estrangement, the painful process of rebuilding trust. But somewhere in that journey, had become a constant presence. Maybe not in a loud, front and center way some people fit into a family, but in the steady, dependable way you don't always notice until it's gone. Had been there at Sunday dinners, laughing along with Nanny Faye's silly jokes. He'd been there when Todd called for a family meeting, his calm energy balancing Todd's boisterous personality. And he'd been there in the quiet moments, the ones that never made it onto television or Instagram. Like the time Kyle had shown up to a barbecue looking pale and shaky, trying to stay sober in a world full of temptations. Had quietly handed him a glass of water, nudged him toward a chair, and sat beside him without saying a word. Because sometimes, silence is the greatest show of support. "I can still hear him," Kyle admitted, his voice catching. That laugh. The way he could make Savannah roll her eyes 1 second. Savannah had been gutted by death. Theirs had been a love that didn't end in bitterness. It ended in life simply pulling them in different directions. But friendship had remained, and with it, a loyalty that transcended romantic titles. When the news broke, she had called Kyle first, her voice trembling, words tumbling out too fast for him to catch all of them. He had driven over without thinking, just to sit with her. Nick was part of our family, Kyle had told her then, the words instinctive true. And she had nodded through her tears, clutching a framed picture of them all from Christmas years ago. In the days after the funeral, the Chrisleys did what they always did. They gathered. They cooked. They told stories. They argued about who was making the coffee wrong. They tried to laugh even when their hearts were heavy. Nanny Faye, in her wisdom, had said, "You don't stop being family just because someone leaves this earth. They're still yours. Always." Kyle thought about that often. Nick wasn't blood, but he didn't need to be. Family, Kyle realized, wasn't about who shared your last name. It was about who showed up when it counted. And Nick had shown up time and time again. Now, weeks later, Kyle found himself sorting through an old box in his garage. Inside was a stack of photos, family trips, birthdays, the occasional blurry selfie from someone's phone. He found one of himself and Nick at a 4th of July cookout. Nick had his arms slung casually around Kyle's shoulder, both of them grinning at something just out of frame. It wasn't a perfect photo. Kyle's hair was a mess, and Nick's shirt was wrinkled, but the happiness was real. He decided he'd have it framed for Savannah. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Kyle finally spoke up. "I've been thinking, maybe we should do something for Nick. A memorial here at the house. Not the sad kind, more like a celebration. Invite people who loved him, tell the stories, eat too much, laugh too much." Todd looked at him for a long moment, his usual sarcasm softening into something more tender. "You mean, do what this family does best? Yeah, I think Nick would like that." Savannah smiled faintly, her eyes wet but warm. He would have been the first one to fire up the grill. And so, a week later, the Chrisley backyard came alive with the sounds of music, clinking glasses, and laughter. Photos of Nick hung from strings of twinkling lights, and a long table overflowed with food. Friends and family gathered, swapping memories about his hockey days, his gentle patience, his ability to charm anyone from a stranger in the grocery store to a stubborn Chrisley grandparent. Kyle stood by the grill, flipping burgers while listening to the chatter around him. It felt good, right, to honor Nick this way. Not with whispered condolences and endless what-ifs, but with the joy he had brought to their lives. When the sun dipped low and the air turned cool, the group gathered around the fire pit. Kyle cleared his throat, glancing at the faces around him. "I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be family. I used to think it was just blood. People you're stuck with whether you like it or not. But Nick taught me something different. He showed up. He cared. He didn't have to, but he did. And that's what makes you family." Savannah reached over and squeezed his hand, her silent way of saying thank you. The night stretched on, the stars coming out in clusters above them. At one point, Kyle stepped away from the group and looked up at the sky. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of the wind chime from the porch. For a moment, he let himself believe it was Nick, just stopping by to check in, to make sure they were all okay. "He's still here," Kyle murmured to himself. "Always will be." And in that moment, Kyle knew it wasn't just a sentimental line to comfort the grieving. It was the truth. Nick Kerdiles was woven into their family's history now. Into the holidays, the inside jokes, the lessons learned. Even in death, he had a place at their table. The fire crackled. The laughter rose again. And Kyle walked back toward the glow, knowing they were carrying Nick with them. Not as a chapter closed, but as a story that would be told for years to come.